Hello and welcome to the GW Book Club, where my good friend Stu and I read through classic Games Workshop books and talk about them. We have got a really fun conversation coming up today. Stu, we are doing one of our non-fiction book clubs this time, and we've been looking at the 6th edition Warhammer Armies Beasts of Chaos. I think this came out in 2003, written by Gav Thorpe, and I think that I thought it was really fun. What was what do you think about this one?
Really fun. And I've been looking at this particular faction for other reasons linked on my channel as well. And it is the first army book, whereas we've been looking before at things from fourth edition and maybe fifth edition, and this is the first time they had a book of their own. This was the first divergence rather than being part of the overall Chaos Army. And it's really cool. And it's so sixth edition. And we'll talk about this a lot, but the whole feel of the book couldn't be more sixth edition. Sixth edition is the grim dark of Warhammer Fantasy, and this book is the grim dark of the Warhammer Fantasy because of the nature of the topic. It's a lovely book. Lots of really things that stood out to me because I've never been a huge Beast of Chaos player or follower. So looking through it, I was like, oh, this is really cool, actually.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is very dark, just generally. I think in a good way. You get, I mean, the art is very, there's loads of like real body horror stuff, and there's some dark themes, but there's also a darkness to just, these are the children of chaos. These are this kind of unrepentant, irredeemable bad guys, these monster men, these beasts who live in the forests and the dark corners of everywhere in the Warhammer world, just waiting to like kidnap away children and bring horror to the Empire and the civilized lands. So there's real darkness throughout this book, and it starts actually with this really like dark kind of folk tale, like this poem, Thomas the Wanderer, which kind of talks about like a child who sees, I guess, a Bretonnian knight and wants to like replicate that and sort of pretend to be the knight and go off into the forest, and then gets lost and presumably killed by Beastmen, and it's just like, right, that's how we're opening the book.
It's definitely dark, and I don't mind saying that I've been looking at a digital version of this book as well as the real one, and I thought I play it when I'm working, which is painting by the day, painting miniatures, and I got text to speech going on this. It didn't like this. Because the language used is sort of a kind of faux, fake, oldie worldy empire sort of thing, and he could unsurprisingly couldn't handle this as much as Voice 3 for Apple users. The Northern lady would have been brilliant for this. He couldn't really handle it, but it's good, and it surprised me actually. I wasn't expecting that. You turn to that page and you think, oh, okay, what's this? This is a really fun way of setting the scene then. It just felt like they had a lot of freedom to do something cool and interesting.
Yeah, very immersive. And I think actually it's one of the best things about Beasts of Chaos for me, and the way that this book works, and even that introduction, is it leans into the really horrifying elements of it and the folk horror stuff. And there is a real like, these are creepy bad guys who are just like outside the villages. Every village in the Empire, you're never safe because in the forest, in the darkness, just beyond your field of vision, there's beastmen living there, and this is what they're like, and this is what they're about. And then you get throughout the course of the book just a real sense that they are, there's a society there. They have a hierarchy and an organization. They are savage, but they're not mindless. But they are just really, they are evil. They're proper chaos creatures. There's nothing redeemable. There's no way back. There's no redemption for any of these guys, because they're kind of like the worst of humans and the worst of animals combined.
Yes.
So they're horrible to each other and they're horrible to everybody else. And that's what then sort of, gives this character this really chaotic evil faction, their character. I think it's great, and I think it is super immersive in pretty much every single page.
Yeah, it's that whole idea about that kind of the almost naturalistic animal nature of them removes any humanity,
Mm.
and there's no forgiveness. There's nothing. There's not an ounce of humanity, and the evil just sort of magnifies all of that and makes it really scary. Just talking about that story at the beginning, and I hadn't really clocked it before because I was focusing on all the strange words. You spotted the artwork around it. It just sort of frames the whole
Sure.
text. Down the bottom, you've got an empire town, and then you've got the wild woods around the edges, and then right in the centre, overshadowing and peering down in a menacing way, is one evil-looking beast head. It's brilliant. It
It
really
is
just
great.
almost sums up the
Yeah.
whole theme.
Yeah, and then that's on every page, or most of the pages through the rest of the book. Down at the bottom, you just get a little line from it. You get a little illustration of it, like the night or the forest and that sort of stuff. So it flows through the whole book and definitely has that impact. But yeah, I mean, we didn't actually talk about the cover as well, which was a Paul Dainton piece, which I think is just fantastic. Just a really,
Yes.
really cool cover. This glamour shot of the Beastmen, but because even at their most glamorous, they're also just bloody and savage and just like monstrous. But they look great. And there's loads of really lovely art in this book actually. Um,
Yes, really, it's grim. It is, like I said,
yes,
it couldn't be more sixth edition. If you
yeah,
it's really great for that. Yeah, that front cover they're just it's horrific, isn't it? They would be horrifying. You imagine living in
yes,
a small empire village near a great forest, and suddenly a host of these guys come charging out. It's it would be
yeah,
horrible. But the overall feel, because of that sixth edition, lots of black and white imagery,
mm,
but not just plain sketches. There's lots of tonal to it. So it looks like they've done almost things maybe have done in color and they've rendered them into black and
mm,
white, which is potential for some of this. But there's definitely sort of black and white watercolor stuff going on, and then pen over the top.
yeah,
But so it feels like it's much more layered. For something you think black and white, you think the pen sketches we've seen in third edition, fourth edition, or something, but these, as I say, it feels like it's a full color thing that's been reprinted in black and white. So you get there's loads of tone and texture all the way through it as well, and it's on every page. There's
yeah.
not a page that isn't busy. You've got, like you said, stuff at the bottom written, but also borders and images and things all over.
Yeah, the graphic
Very
design is really, really good. I think it's really strong throughout the sixth edition, actually. And yeah, because
yes,
we are post, more time has come out. Thomas Pyronin, John Blanche, that labor of love that they created, that really leaned into the sort of horror roots of Warhammer Fantasy. And then Pyronin was leading the Warhammer sixth edition, and again, John Blanche is quite hands on in the actual sort of aesthetic design of that book. Gavthorpe took over the line as Lawmaster once Pyronin left, but the entire sixth edition series of Warhammer Armies books all have that incredible depth and darkness to them.
yes,
I mean, the graphics in this, I think, is Alex Boyd, Nuala Kennedy, and Stefan Kopinski. And together, they create, like, every page has some texture, has some, there's amazing pieces of art throughout, but there's also just some really nice pages. I mean, there's like maps and stuff that look like they've been painted onto human skin that's been stretched
yes,
out. There's pages that look like old, burned, destroyed pieces of paper. There's just loads to see and like just pour over as you're reading it. It gives the whole thing this kind of feel of like an ancient forbidden text that
yes,
you're
yes.
reading.
It's like an art book, isn't
It
it?
is, yeah.
It's
There's an element of that for sure, and then yeah, loads of really fantastic art. I mean, there's some Adrian Smith pieces in there. There's an amazing John Blanche piece hidden at the back. There's loads of other people: Paul Dainton, Carl Kopinski, and Nuala Kennedy again. So like loads of really great art pieces throughout. I mean, do you have a favorite? Is there one that stood out to you the most?
So we talked about this at the beginning. It's hard actually, and I've probably said this all the other times, but because it's just so full of art, it
Yeah.
feels like you're scouring every page. But I really like the sort of double spread that you get early on before the actual main. Right, I think it's page 4 or 5 or something like that, and you've got this double spread, and you've got all these different kinds of beasts, a bit like the ones that we've talked about in previous books clubs when we were talking about the humanoid beastmen, not just your classic kind of cow goat like beastmen. You've got people, there's like a man pulling at his face, you've got like a flying bug thing going on, sort of Nurgle-esque. You've got other spawn on there as well. There's somebody bending over with their rib cage coming
Yeah,
out,
like their
and it's
spines
just,
coming away.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how their legs are still working because he's lost the whole bottom part of it, but it's incredible. And there's normal beastmen on there as well, but
Yeah.
there's a lot going on in that picture. And as a double spread, that's very cool that it shows all those different kinds of beastmen, because they're hinted at a little bit in the lore that's discovered here, because it's very easy to look at the more, this is where Beastman the army became a bit more homogenized, didn't it? It became this,
Yeah.
this is Beastmen look like this. They're all painted in a fairly uniform way. And in many ways that's withdrawn from the lore that beasts are made up of people that are mutated. They could be the original children of Chaos Beastmen, but they could be people that have to go and live in the forest because they've got mutations that have changed and developed. And this bit of artwork just brings all of that together, and the horror of chaos, not just people with goat heads kind of thing and hooves.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting point actually, just about that the homogenization of the army. And we see this is one of the not necessarily downsides, but one of the evolutions, I suppose, that happens through sixth and beyond, where we do get sort of armies are broken down into their constituent parts and made more sort of narrow in focus. So you saw it with the undead, where they became vampire counts and tomb kings. So you sort of split out what once was a faction of just everything that was undead. Now it's much more specific, and because the lore started to build around those armies, they became much narrower in focus. Here, as you said before, this is the first time we're moving away from there just being a chaos book or set of books about all of chaos, all of the gods and all of the different followers, to there is a hordes of chaos which has got your warriors and your demons in it, and then we've got beasts of chaos. In later editions, that will actually be separated again, and you'll have warriors of chaos, demons of chaos, and beasts. And you do move to a place that is much more, it's almost laser focused on just a very specific version of it. I was
Yeah,
quite surprised with this book, though, how much more sort of time and space is given to the non-miniature version of
yeah,
Beast. So there's still all the classic stuff. They allude to all of that. Like you said, the art has elements of that you don't see in the miniatures. The army lists even have things that never came out in miniatures during this edition. There's still space for your ostrich man or your cow-headed or tiger-headed beast man or whatever it might be from way back when. But yeah, the official version, the heavy metal version, has become they're
yeah,
all gauze. They all look mostly the same. They're all painted mostly the same. So yeah, there is definitely that process happening here. But I was surprised
yeah.
how much the book allowed for some of that other stuff too.
Yeah, I think that slowly removes a little bit more in the next book,
Yeah.
especially. I mean, they only had 2 books on their own anyway. We're not here to review that next book, but the evolution changes even more because there were a lot more plastic kits produced for that book as
Yes.
well. And again, you get more of that kind of the new plastic Minotaur, all of those kind of things. Yeah, I think you lose that a little bit more, but
You do.
but it's nice to still see that. I mean, I suppose you're talking a little bit about the lore there. I don't know what you've thought about. This book is the same length as any other, but in terms of the amount they can talk about, I suppose, this is part of another army before. In many ways, their history is their history, but
Mm.
there's not as much in terms of a rich history, like the history of the High Elves we've covered, or the history of the Empire of Man, which by its nature has so many rulers and campaigns, and they're linked so closely to everyone else's story. These are the horrific bad guys, very much in the Empire, the men of the Empire's story, really, or the men of the western part of the world, really. So there's enough here, but for me, it's also noticeable there isn't as much.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't exist and there can't be. So what's here is good. It doesn't feel like it's shortchanged or badly presented. But they're also, if you were going to, certainly, I'm giving a bad example of this because I'm rabbiting on, but if you were going to take it as a story, you could surmise it in 100 or 200 words to someone. What is Beastman? How do they evolve? I'm going to give you a 10-minute sort of rundown of that whole history, whereas you couldn't do that with Empire or Elves or something. Such a bigger thing.
Sure.
So they've probably got more words here to tell less. Maybe that's why we got the little stories and things in there as well.
And it's an interesting point, actually. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really like about this book, and admittedly, I'm not a Beastman player. I really like how this book is sort of set in opposition to the Empire. So yes. Yeah, it's not exclusively the Empire, and you do get some talk about beyond the old world and like the nature of chaos and all that sort of stuff. But there's a real strength and a feeling throughout where they talk about how the Empire is affected by the Beastmen and where you find the Beastmen. There's an amazing map of the old world that is, it's kind of the inversion of what we see in the Empire books, where now we're getting to see the human settlements, so Middenheim in particular, and then all of the sort of the darkness of the Beastmen, where they are in relation to human settlements and ruins and all. There's like more detail in this map than in some of the ones we've seen in Empire books and stuff like that. But you're seeing it from this sort of predatory perspective, which is really interesting because you're now the bad guys. So you're sort of seeing, well, this is where we stalk our prey now, which I think is great because it really undermines, in a good way, it undermines the sense of security you feel when you're reading the Empire book.
Agreed.
In that, 100%. You're talking about, because when you're reading Empire Army books, you feel like the Empire is this complete thing with borders and it's super safe. And sure, there's lots of bad guys pressing on those borders, but we're also in this kind of space where, you have a nation state that is strong and protected and there's nothing bad inside. And then you read this book and it flips that on its head and it says, oh no, actually, there's stuff under the bed and it's going to come and get you. I think that's great. And because that's what you want from a chaos bad guy.
Yes, I like the fact they don't feel the need to expand upon it, because we're used to army books where there's obviously their most common foe, but there will be, as you read the history, and then they went on this campaign, and then they were off in this part of the world, and this person went down all the way down to fight the Tomb Kings and all of it. There's not really any of that here. It is very much, this is the locale they're in. This is what they are. And it's a little bit more narrow and focused, but it works really well. In fact, we don't really see that in other armies, I don't think. It's a bit more akin in some ways to the... Maybe, yes, maybe you're right, yeah. But there's definitely not so much of it. It's good. I mean, you probably see it more now with the Arcane Journals that are very bit more focused on a campaign idea for that book, and that becomes the theme of that book. But this is the theme in itself. And yeah, it's good.
There is quite a cool page about that beyond the old world, and there's just peppered in there a few cool ideas. And again, this is what I was talking about, like the stuff that doesn't exist in miniatures but is suggested by the lore, where they kind of say, oh, well, actually, there's tales of tiger beast men in Ind. And you might see like lizard beast men in Lustria. So there's these kind of suggestion that there's different types of chaos mutations, different kinds of beast men in all of these different places around the Warhammer world. I think that's quite cool. Because there's a suggestion. They talk at one point about in the like under cities, in the dwarf and the dwarf cities, there are like almost white ape style beastmen, and that
Yeah.
brought to mind for me Zaragoz, which we read in a
Yes.
book
Yes.
club
Of
ages
course.
ago, and there was just a random selection in the caves underneath the city of Zaragoz in Estelia, a random selection of white furred creature ape men. And we, at the time, were like, what are these guys? They're not anything from Warhammer. I don't know whether it's intentional, but this book is
Mm.
almost like maybe those Estalian white apes were actually beastmen in the
I have
cave.
to. Oh well, if we get the chance to speak to Gav, maybe it'll be something we try and remember to ask him because yeah, that it could well be. It could well
Yeah.
be a bit of a callback from that book, which would be so cool. Would be
Well, that would
really
be
cool.
really fun. Just like canonizing and
Mm.
explaining something that sort of didn't quite make sense at the time. But I think your earlier point is a fair one about how there's plenty of material in this book, but it
Yeah.
also doesn't cover that much ground when it comes to the
Mm.
lore and the background. It's all really cool and really interesting and immersive, but you don't know a lot more at the
Mm.
end than you do after the first couple of pages. You get some
Yeah.
more detail and some more cool stuff, but it's not like you say when we read the High Elf book and revisited that. We went on a huge epic quest. We lived through a saga of the High Elves,
Yes.
thousands of years of history and how they've evolved and changed, and all their leaders and all of the different natures of the people of the High Elves and how they've changed. Here, and maybe it's because this is the nature of Beastmen, but they kind of turn up and they just fight a load of battles with people, but they don't really change. They're just in the forests and they're just being
Yes.
Beastmen. Um, so it doesn't necessarily tell a big epic story. It kind of presents them as a thorn in the side of the Empire or whomever your good guy factions might be. But then that's kind of all that they do. There's a couple of cool special characters, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yes. And you get a little bit of a lore overlap,
Yeah.
more storytelling then, but it's this is more generic. It's very it doesn't mean that they can go into good descriptive detail
Mm.
of each. I mean, you get a whole section on herdstones and beastly encampments, which may have had to have been a paragraph in a book like The Empire because they've got so much to cover, whereas they can spend a couple of pages telling us about it, which is good. It gives us good detail.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think I I found myself really enjoying it.
Mm.
And having a lot more sympathy is the wrong word, but like I like a lot more enjoyment from the Beastmen than I thought I would. I've always enjoyed them as a sort of villainous kind of they're henchmen to an extent, right?
Yeah.
So they're in the background, they're doing stuff. They're great villains. They are amazing when they turn up in I don't know, a Warhammer Quest adventure or anything like that. So they're always present and they're a good villain, much like orcs and goblins, I suppose, in that
Hmm.
you want them in the world because they're doing lots of cool stuff, but they're not necessarily the sort of the heroes or the center stage
Yeah.
kind of characters. Interestingly, I don't know that the book makes them as center stage as you might want from their own army book. They still feel like just sort
Yes.
of part of a thing rather than the whole thing. Some of that's by design, I suppose, because you can ally with the other type of chaos army. So you can have demons, you can have warriors and marauders and whatever else, and beasts all together in an army, and it just depends who your favorite flavor of chaos is, and
Yeah.
that sort of becomes the priority. So if you go for a beast man leader, you get more
Yes.
beastmen than you would demons. But if you went for demons, you get more demons than you would beastmen, but you can still do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if
I'm
they
with you.
have quite the same. They don't have the same breadth, and do they have the same kind of like commanding presence that other armies get in their own story? I suppose.
Probably not actually, and again, I think it is probably the nature of who they are. You're right; they are the kind of the bad guys, and they fill
Mm,
that role in the same way as orcs and goblins do to a certain extent. But I think where they diverge would be orcs and goblins have these big leaders, and they're funny, and they're charismatic in their own way, and they have some kind of greatness. Mostly, they think they're great,
yeah.
but it makes them brings them to the front more. They have these wars, they have these famous leaders over time that becomes the center, become the focus. Whereas Beastmen are by their nature a lot more tragic and
Mm.
withdrawn. So you don't have those loud "look at me, I'm great." They're not trying to be great other than within their own herd. They just want to be the best
Mm.
of themselves and kill. Whereas the orcs and the goblins, some of them to a certain extent, seem to want to prove that they are the best ever out of all of them ever. They is the best. And I think that that's the difference between the different kinds of standard. So the standard orc and the standard beastman, probably not an awful lot of difference, but in terms of the whole culture and the leadership of that culture, one's so much more alive and vivid than the other one. This is sort of grim, tragic, and a bit more evil.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they feel a little bit more low key. Low key, the
Yeah.
word, maybe.
That's a really good point, actually, and a very valid one, just about the fact that, despite the fact that the beasts and orcs and goblins and Skaven, they occupy a similar role in sort of the broader kind of tapestry of Warhammer stories. There would be a danger, I guess, that they could feel really similar as factions and as sort of the background for them. They're just like hordes of bad guys,
Yeah.
and savage bad guys as well. But they do feel really different.
There's
Beasts
no
in
humour
this book.
whatsoever, is
No,
there?
there's no humor here. You compare them to Skaven, who are relatively close, sort of siblings or cousins, I suppose. There's a complete difference in tone and sort of feel, because these guys are nasty, I think, as well. Skaven are obviously nasty grot bags, but there's a different kind of nastiness to them, because Skaven are always like quite happy to screw over their leaders, and they're cowards and they're running away. These guys just feel really like just aggressively horrible,
Mm.
which they're supposed to, and it works really well because they just are. That is the beast, that is the animal nature, right? It's almost like they have these base instincts that command everything they do, and there isn't the same kind of morality. Even there's a sort of morality within Skaven. Skaven know, they convince themselves of stuff, and they know. I don't want to say they know right from wrong, but they know when they are like doing something that will help versus something that will hinder. They know when they're being self-serving and things like that. The beasts here are just doing what they're almost, naturally or unnaturally
Yeah.
built to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just flicking through here, looking at the lore page, and I realised that you didn't say what your favourite piece of artwork was.
Sure,
And
yeah.
I think it deserves a mention because it is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so I really like the Gibbet Tree of Woe piece, which is just a full page piece of artwork of just this horrific tree full of just like people who have been hanging in cages and sort of left out. And it is, I really like it. It's an amazing piece of art. I think it's just really, really characterful and dark, and it speaks to this, the nature of the Beastmen. But it also is this very nice kind of continuity for me to,
Yeah.
like, you go back to John Blanche pictures with those just really withered and twisted and gnarled sort of chaos trees that John
Yeah.
Blanche loves to draw. Even the skeleton horde has one in the background.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it's so good. That is that is my concept of a Warhammer tree, which is, a very strange thing to have.
Wait.
But like, this is a continuation of that, I think. This, and I think it always speaks to, because the undead or chaos or all of this bad stuff that's in the Warhammer world, how it corrupts nature, how it is completely defiling and undermining the natural order.
Yeah.
A tree is a great example of that natural order, and it's just being completely defiled by all of this chaos
Yeah.
stuff. So I think it's really, really powerful piece.
It's a brilliant piece. And funny enough, it's a bit like the plastic trees that they
Yes,
made.
they
It's got
did.
that
Yes, yes,
feel to. It's also the only artwork in the book, I think, that doesn't have a Beastman in it.
sure.
You've managed to pick the. You've gone for the trendy option, haven't you? If your pick wears a beanie and takes notes in a moleskin diary in an independent coffee shop, but it's amazing though, and I probably it would have been on my list of if you hadn't chosen it, it would have been very close there. But it's very cool.
It's really, really cool.
Wouldn't
Yeah,
mind a
it's
print
really
of
nice.
that actually. It's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. There's even just thinking to another piece, another art book, which was the Blood on the Reich Black Library history. So it's like a travel log through the Empire,
Not very nice
and
travel log, but yes.
yeah, but it is it's presented as a traveler who's sort of noting down just the people and the things they see throughout the Empire as they journey. There's loads of, I mean, there's some really nice John Blanche pieces in there, but there's loads of amazing Dave Gallagher art, and that also includes the withered tree of hope at the very end,
Yeah.
which is this kind of mythical tree somewhere in the old world or beyond the horizon that represents hope in the Warhammer world, and it's dying. And again, I think that that's just this idea of trees in the Warhammer world being quite symbolic in a number of ways. That's quite cool. So yes, I do. I really like that piece. I think it's really, really cool, and it definitely speaks to just how dark and bad the Beasts of Chaos are.
Yes. Yeah. And a great example of this book, really.
Mm.
You could look at that picture and say, this is this book in
Yes.
terms of an art style
Yeah.
and the grim feeling of the way the lore and the story's told at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. Yeah. I mean, I think there is just because there's detail about the children of chaos and the chaos spawn and the way in which the gods work and all that sort of stuff. I suppose it's an interesting one when you think about sixth edition. So in terms of the history of Warhammer, fourth edition was the first time that factions had their own specific army books. We have then seen another generation or updates through the course of fifth and sixth edition. As we say, this is the first time you're getting a dedicated Beasts army book, but
Mm-hmm.
Beastmen have appeared in the Realm of Chaos books. They've appeared in lots of different publications over the course of the last number of editions.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really interesting idea, I think, that we probably don't think about enough when it comes to the army books, is that every time you revisit one, how much do you sort of repackage material that people probably know? So they sort of received knowledge of what is a beastman, how does a beastman work, what's chaos, what are the chaos gods? How much of that stuff do you retell every
Mm.
single time versus how much do you say, well, everybody's going to know what that is now, or we can do it instead of doing it across 5 pages, we can do it in one, and actually let's dedicate our page count to something new.
Mm-hmm.
So this book, I think, walks a reasonably good line of actually saying, okay, well, what are the chaos gods? Who are the four chaos gods, and how do they function, and how are they different? And what are the children of chaos, and how are they part of this sort of the effects of chaos in the old world? So you kind of get quite a good introduction. I think it would be interesting to take a look at whether or not that's slimmed down even further in future
Mm-hmm.
editions, because
Yes.
you
Yeah.
just assume everybody knows it by then.
Yeah. I mean, I think they tend to, especially from this point onwards, because it felt like sixth edition is still closely connected with the game we have now, and definitely through seventh and eighth edition. The books just evolve relatively slowly, I think, and it's kind of
Yeah.
new miniatures added each time, and maybe a change of the special characters.
Hmm.
But the way the units work rules wise, and the number of units and the kind of units don't really change. There's definitely eras. I think you got up to that third edition era. The fourth and fifth edition is that weirdly evolving of Warhammer into something new, a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more accessible, and definitely more colourful than we have now. Because it was kind of dark, brightened a little bit, and then things got very dark. And then we just, I think, I think I think there's three eras in my mind
Mm,
anyway, and this is the beginning of the era that led into seventh and eighth edition and on to the old world now. And yes, the artwork was a little bit darker, and a lot of it was because of printing costs. I think, to do with the amount of black and white that was in some of this, but the actual feel of the game and the way it's portrayed, and the armies and the way they're portrayed. This was the start of the era in many ways we're still in now. So I don't think it changes an awful lot. I think it's a case of adding in those new units, those new things that become those new retail drivers, really, of each new edition in some
sure.
ways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a very interesting point as well, because the business side of things, as in we need now there to be an entire army. So we need like legitimate core unit choices. We need various general choices. We need specials and rare units. So all of this sort of stuff is then going to drive what's going to be in the book and how much time you're going to spend in the book talking about Doom Bulls and Minotaurs and Centaurs versus anything else. There might be stuff that was dropped and that moved around and we don't have access to anymore. So you're going to get a more restricted focus. You're not going to have as much time spent on things that just aren't about. So the actual army list here. I mean, so there's an interesting thing. There's an interesting thing with this book, which I think this is a natural challenge of what they're trying to do here, which is like how many times the word beast is used to describe different things, and I think it gets away with it. I think it does get away with it. I think it's fine, but we're approaching that borderline where you're like, okay, so in
TM.
well, it's more like it's more the sort of the danger of repetition, where you're like, right, my Beastmen army is led by a beast lord riding a beast chariot, carrying a beast glaive. He's wearing his beast armor and his beast boots, and there's like a danger that everything is a beast something, or gore is the other. Is the other. So like there's so many gores.
And what do we call the slightly better gore? Well, the bestie gore.
Yeah, the bestie gore, which I actually quite like. And I don't think at the time, certainly, I don't think I ever really put together that. I think in my head it was like, oh, it's like a beastie
gore. I think
beastie gore. But yes, it's just they are the best gores. So
was that a working title that just never got updated as well?
But like Ungore and Gore and Bestigore and Tusk Gore, and there's lots of other stuff as well. It's in danger. It's getting close to just becoming this kind of like word salad where the same word is being used to maybe do too many things. And like I say, I think it just gets away with it. And I think we will see worse examples of it in later Games Workshop history, where the effort just didn't quite come together. But yeah, it just jumped out at me a little bit of where I was like, okay, beast this and gore that. We're getting there. We're getting to a dangerous space.
Yeah. I mean, there's not too much new here anyway. I mean, again, like I mentioned at the top of the video, I was looking at the progression of Beastman anyway throughout the different editions, and things are just slowly added. So that it's probably more of a decision for them. What do we take from the wider chaos list that they can also still have? So you end up with your dragon ogres, and things like that in the army, and your minotaurs and things. So what counts as beastmen? We've got obviously Spawn of Chaos here, which appear in many different army lists throughout the years. And you can get them in your demon army list, you can have them in your Warriors of Chaos army list even now. So it was a kind of, we need to fill out the roster, don't we?
I quite like that. Yeah, because
I do as well, because there's a connection between them.
It's Beasts of Chaos, and I think that they live up to that with you, because I think there's Harpies as well, aren't there? And
there's Harpies,
Centaurs,
Giants.
Yes, Giants as well, Trolls,
Chaos Giants,
Ogres,
Chaos Trolls. Yeah.
All of that sort of stuff does give it an extra sort of, there's more options, and there's different stuff.
We can have very different themes. You can just have that horde of beasts, all the different kinds of gore, which I really like actually. But you can also, again, you go pure sort of monster mash, really.
Yeah,
You're going to
you
have all
absolutely
these
can. Yeah,
trolls
just monster
and
armies.
giants and yeah, and we saw more of these in the later editions, and with the next edition really, which was
Sure.
their only other book they ever had on their own until soon, hopefully. But yeah, I think they managed to find enough in there. But most of these things, I think they all existed before. I might be wrong, but I think all
I
these things
think
existed in fifth edition in
I
one
think
guise or
they
another.
did. Yeah, I think so. I was similarly looking into the history. I mean, I think centaurs. I can't remember when they first appeared, but obviously at some point centaurs so chaos centaurs became centaurs, which
Yes.
is fine. Obviously, you're making use of the gore word,
Yeah.
which I don't know if that was what drove that. I don't think centaurs was a problem, but maybe it speaks too much to like Greek mythology, and they wanted something that was a little bit
Yeah.
more, yeah, Warhammery, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it definitely makes it Warhammery, doesn't it? It's added their
Yeah,
own sort of tone to it. Were Doomballs around in the fifth edition? I can't remember, but
I
there's
need
a
to double
lot in
check.
that realm
Yeah, I'd need
realm
to
of
double check.
chaos book, wasn't it, for
Yeah,
fifth edition, which was huge because it's obviously all factions, and then there was the second Champions of Chaos book, I think,
champions.
with
Yeah,
the special characters for it, and there were Beastman characters in that as well. But I think most of these things are just a continuation of different things from that original list.
yeah. But they do work together well, and yeah, I think dragon ogres have been around for a long time, actually, haven't they? Yes, because there's
Yeah.
the old Nick Bibby ones
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So, I mean, dragon ogres are very cool, and you're
Hmm.
probably never going to have a full army of them. So,
No.
it's a good way
Well,
of giving them
Kolek
a sort of.
Suneater, I think, is a way of doing. I think his characters in this book. I might be wrong. I've been looking at so much of this recently, the special character wise, but I think there might be ways of doing it if you're crazy and you wanted to buy lots of them. But
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, that would set you
lots
back
of
a
different
fair
themes
amount.
available to you anyway, which is what we were touching on.
But yeah, I think the actual, the gores themselves. I really like the idea of the ungores and the gores and the best of gores, like
Mm.
as a hierarchy within Beastman society. And I think
Yeah.
it also allowed them to do some really cool, because like the ungores have a very traditional kind of like devilish kind of uh satyr sort of look and feel to them,
Yes.
or a
Yeah.
fawn. They're those kind of like creepy kind of, they would be appearing in on Grecian urns and stuff like that as like weirdo creeps who are trying to, you know, they're probably selling wine or whatever. So like, but there's real devilish look to these guys. In a lot of the art as well, they look really like devilish in the face.
Yes.
And then your regular gores and your best of gores look more like the sort of traditional,
Mm.
what becomes the traditional Warhammer Beastman. And they've, the goat headed and goat legged kind of like quite strong visual of those guys. So I like that little distinction. You've got these sort of runty kind of little ungore guys, and then the regular gores, and then the best of the regular gores that then wear armor and kind of a nails. That's quite cool. It's a nice way of separating out the army and giving you different infantry choices. It's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
different really to do it. We see the same thing with dwarfs essentially, don't you? Where you've just got
Yes.
regular dwarfs, and then you've got older and stronger and more heavily armored dwarfs. Um,
Yeah.
so like it works well and gives you some really nice central units. And I like the
Hmm.
models for this era as well of all of those guys. I think the actual infantry look really cool. I mean, there's obviously a load of heavy metal pages where you get to see a load of those guys.
Very good as well.
Yeah,
Really,
really
you
good.
go from all this black and white art to this suddenly this quite striking and quite numerous section.
Mm,
There's a lot of color pages in one go,
yeah,
and it's quite cleverly done because it's in the previous books when the fourth and fifth edition, right at the end, it's like now you can collect an army. It's usually black and white pages, and it was very thinly veiled catalogue pages. Really, you could actually show
sure.
the box. Whereas this is kind of right in the middle of the book after you've read the lore and you've seen the individual entry, not the army list, but the profiles and the bit of lore about each individual unit. It's headed collecting a Beastman army.
Mm.
and it's really quite fluffy. It's kind of start small, just pick the models up you want first, and then it's kind of you can build up to a small army, and then a bigger one, and then a bigger one, adding more models as you go. It's that kind of, it's almost White Dwarf article-esque, and
It is, yeah.
it's kind of we're going to take your hand and lead you into the forest and show you how to collect the Beastman army. But it's really good with that, and then you know it just beautiful color pictures of the army, some real scenes as well. So it's not just all that kind of individual modules on the blue background. It's lots of really nice scenes. It's just pages and pages of it, and then it sort of blends into painting pages, quite a few painting pages as well.
Yeah, there's a nice little showcase of converted models too, which is nice to see.
Yeah, and there's some really great ones there.
Yeah, I think it's really nicely done, and you're right. It is a guide. It literally is a guide instead of just being, because you do see this in earlier Warhammer Armies books, where it is a showcase of beautifully painted heavy metal miniatures that does show off how amazing these armies and these miniatures can be, but it doesn't take you on a journey. It doesn't say, well, here's how to start putting together that army, and here's how to sort of evolve it to that point. Even the painting guide here, which that doesn't have a lot of real estate, but it does do a pretty good job of giving you options and sort of suggesting recipes and all that kind of stuff that I think you can get a lot from it. So I think it is very effectively done to help people genuinely collect a Beasts of Chaos army.
It shows you different variants. So this is the very red skin as the studio army. So it shows you that first with painting, but then it gives you variants at the bottom as well. So you've got your kind of nurgly coloured one, you've got your sort of real dark skinned one, and it's good to see the different variations as well.
Yeah, I think it's good. And then you do, because I mean, I was hearing some people speak recently about the fact that you would get a bestiary section and an army list entry that would have the stats for everyone. And I think this is pretty standard in a lot of armies books and codexes over the years. Have you ever thought about whether or not you needed both? Or whether
I think we talked about this a little bit before in one of the other books, in one of our previous recordings. It does feel like it's repeated, but a little bit less so in here. The stat line's there, but it's more about the lore, so the unit entries there, and I think it's got the special rules. And by the time you actually get to the army list, the army list is a bit more condensed. All the information is still there, but it's kind of like these are the units, these are the stat lines, this is their names of their special rules and things, and what they do. But the army list will feel more like these are the pages you need in order to select it and choose it with your points there. So I think they got the balance right here.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe it's just because we're used to it. You could still put it all in one way, but it would make choosing your army list a little bit more arduous because there'd be so many more pages to flip through. So I think this is probably the best option out of the two to do it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. And then yes, you get special characters here as well, of course. When you think 6th edition was interesting because they did, for a lot of the armies, they sort of presented 2 new characters. So there were very rarely more than 2 or 3 in most of the books. I think we get 3 in here. And for most armies, or several at least, they would just go, okay, here's 2 brand new characters because we're moving the story forward, or we're adding some more depth and putting some new stuff in there. So you take the Empire book, for instance, Karl Franz is not in it, unlike the previous edition and later editions. So you just don't have him present. Here, we get 3 different Beastman characters. Kazrak the One-Eye was actually from that Champions of Chaos book that came out in the 5th edition. So we do get some continuity there. He is a cool character. I like him a lot. I think he's really, really cool. And the way his story is told here is cool. Because you get a little sort of 2-page story about a different Beast Lord who's like worried that Kazrak is going to start taking all the glory. So he's sort of trying to defend his position and get into the action quicker. He fails because he's not as good as the One-Eye. And then you actually get the One-Eye's own story in the next couple of pages. I think that's very cool.
Yes, I like the way that's put together. I just realised, look, his stat line then, it's quite expensive, wasn't he? But
how many points was he?
292 points. That's quite It's quite
Right.
pricey. But yes, I agree. In fact, I really like the characters of all three that were included in this book.
Mm.
It doesn't feel like it's sort of overdone. There's not too much of them, but there's a really nice little sort of background and story for each. And they were all quite different in their own ways and quite interesting. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think hearing people talk about what might be coming soon with the old world. This is, God knows when this will go out. We might even have an announcement depending on what happens at Adepticon, or what has happened, because this will definitely be after that. But Morga at the moment, people are very excited about the potential for him
Sure.
coming back because of the very nature of his character and being able to be sort of disappear and reborn and things like that. So,
Yeah, the Master of Skulls.
um,
Yeah, because he's more of the sort of. I mean, you get his birth story here, which is suitably horrific. It's very well
yes,
told, but also this is kind of the spirit of the beasts incarnate.
yeah.
Almost, it's more than just a beast man. This is a herald of darkness. This is something, it's kind of an unnatural force. So there's absolutely the potential for this character for Morga to appear in the old world theoretically. And, I think that we've got had references to how and what that looks like. I think there's a lot of potential to have some real fun. I mean, it's interesting, especially when you think about some of the other stuff we see in here. Whether it's the dragon ogres and things like that, because they talk about the oldest dragon ogres, the Shoggoths, who were as big as cities. Because they'd grown to be enormous because they were born before the old ones came to the Warhammer world. They're like one of the oldest creatures in Warhammer. And when you put those guys, these potentially city castle sized Shoggoths and Dragon Ogres, and Morgur, this sort of spirit of the beasts together, it reminds me a bit of Kragnos from Age of
Mm,
Sigmar, and whether or not there's like that kind of thing, you could do this kind of enormous Centaur or Dragon Ogre style creature that is the spirit of the
mm.
beast through
Yeah,
through through
an
Morgur.
incredible model to say, wouldn't it?
You could do something
So,
really spectacular with it. I mean, the Kragnos miniature's pretty great, but there's a conversion there I think that one could do that would be really fun if they don't go in
yeah,
that direction.
yeah, definitely. Well, I used some of Kragnos on a miniature that I did. Just back end, but we won't go on to that yet. It's quite expensive parts, but anyway. But yeah, yes, I agree, and there is definitely room for them in the future. Be really excited to see. I don't think it's something we'll see right away,
Hmm.
but it's nice to when you're the special characters from this era that still are sort of viable and could work in different storylines. That's always good as well.
Yeah, it's
A lot
fun.
easier with these kind of characters than humans, obviously.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Although, because Kazrak wouldn't be alive
No.
at that time. I think he's too young. But I really like his interaction. I mean, again, it kind of sums up the fact that the Beastmen in this book are very much set up against the Empire. But
Yes.
his like war of vengeance with Boris Todbringer is just
Yes.
really, really fun. To the extent of, Todbringer costs Kazrak his eye, so then the next time they fight, Kazrak gets specific vengeance by taking out Boris Todbringer's eye, but then lets him live because he
Yeah.
loves the sort of cut and thrust of their relationship, which I
If
think is
only there was a saying that would sum that up. Uh,
but it's good. I think it works. I think it's really fun.
it
It's on
does.
the
It's good fun.
nose, but it's
Yeah.
great. And then yeah, you also have Gorthor, the Beast Lord, who
Mm.
lived 1,000 years earlier, and again took the beast hordes to the very gates of I think it's Hergig, which I've always loved as a name of a city. But yes, that's a fun story as well. Sadly, and I think this maybe speaks to, well, maybe not. I think a lot of orcs and goblins get killed. Special characters fail at their sort of epic quests. But the fact that Gorthor is presented as being one of the greatest beastmen that's ever lived, and he's had the greatest like Bray herd ever,
Mm.
and he was still defeated by just some guy at a fortress. It's a little bit. of a shame. It doesn't give you the sort of the
Yeah,
the like we're the main characters feel that you do get with others. Don't get me wrong, it's actually a really fun story, and one of the coolest things about it, I say cool advisedly, but is actually the lengths to which I can't remember the name of the human lord who sort of is defending the city, but the lengths to which he has to go and the sacrifices that he enforces upon his people are so extreme that it is bleak, but
yeah,
that is what allows them to sort of survive. And then the Knight of the Blazing Sun just turn up fresh off of a crusade, and they arrive just in time to sort of save the day. So it's not that it doesn't have an enormous cost, and it doesn't take the cost of actual like the humanity of the humans in order to
yeah.
survive. But it is just a bit of a shame that you never, maybe through Kazrak, but you don't quite get a sense throughout the book of just like how, if I'm choosing to collect a Beasts of Chaos army, we're going to be like riding high because
Yeah,
it feels like you're going to lose all the time. They keep
yeah,
losing.
they do, and like we both alluded about the size of them, their footprint on the old world and in the history in terms of notoriety. You've just given that example then, and it's the same with kind of One Eye, because who's he fighting with? Boris Todbringer, which is a known name, but it's not Karl Franz, is it? It's not.
Sure.
It's not. It's not. It's not that massive sort of moment that's. It's not Helfen, is it? There's not these kind of
Sure.
really epic kind of moments that appear in the main rulebook timeline all the time. These things that really sort of stand out as part of the whole Warhammer history. These feel like smaller events.
Yeah. Which I guess is just the nature
Of them.
yeah, but because they are just one of the bad guys. They're one of the hordes that exist that if it was D&D, relatively low level adventurers would face down thousands of these
Yeah.
over their career. So they're kind of in that awkward spot of they're never going to be the sort of main characters because that's just not the place they occupy in the world.
They'd be tagged onto a main chaos incursion, wouldn't they? So
Yeah,
it would
yes.
be that chaos warrior, that champion of chaos, that demon priest, whatever it is, that becomes the big name in those campaigns.
Now you make me wonder. So we know that Archaon was the 13th ever chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a Beastman ever chosen, or are they all warriors of chaos?
I
don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know either.
Have a little look at this. But that kind of feels like that would be cool. That would be a cool thing to do. Because one of the things that I really, really like about, I mean, I like a lot of this book. I probably sounds like I'm being more critical, but I do really enjoy this book. Actually, it's great, and I keep on pushing over here because I've got it because I love it. But like the idea here is that these are the sort of beloved creatures of the Chaos Gods because they are gross, because they are mean, because they are just chaos incarnate. The Chaos Gods love them. They are their children, and that's I think that is great, and they can be their favorite child even if they're not going to be the ones that destroy the world.
Do they love them like a pet, though? Is that the thing, isn't it?
Maybe. Yes, maybe.
If they love them like a dog, love the dog, but you're not going to ask it to lead, are you? Someone else is going to be doing that.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a real sense of character in this book. Like you do get a really nice. I mean, I want to say it's a sense of time and place, but obviously it's a specific edition of Warhammer. It feels like 6th edition, and it feels like, which for a lot of people is their favorite edition, and understandably because it is full of amazing material like this. But the Beasts of Chaos are set up to be this really interesting, fun army to play, and they are very much at the heart of the world, and they're established in a really interesting way. I think if you're going to collect a Beasts of Chaos army at this time with this book, I assume you kind of have a sense that your guys are never going to be, they're never going to end the world, they're never going to take over the world. They're just going to make everyone's lives miserable. which is what they are trying to do. So it's kind of a win on that
Yes.
on that front. I don't know how they played. I can't remember how they played on the tabletop. Whether they lived up to that annoyance or
I
not.
don't think they were particularly competitive from memory.
I'd be
I think
surprised.
they've had
Yeah,
their
I'd be surprised.
moments. Um, right now, they may be better than they have been for a number of
Sure.
years, um, it's yeah. I think they have their favourite. They have their really loyal lovers of this army, the people that
Yeah.
were really into them. But it's very evident that
Mm.
they're not. They wouldn't have been one of the big. I don't need the figures from the sales in front of me to be pretty confident that these would have been one of the book releases that didn't make as much money as a High Elves release would have
Sure.
done, or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's definitely one of those more supporting factions within the lore, and also within in terms of sort of financial and all the other things that would have come into it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like you get past the special characters and you think you're pretty much done with the book. Then before you get to the magic section, which is pretty cool because there's three laws to choose from based
Yeah.
on the three Gales gods that can have magic. You get the beast tongue, the black tongue, black speech. And there's quite a
Yes.
lot on it, isn't there? You used to it with dwarves and but you wouldn't expect it for beasts, but you can write words in the black tongue if you want to, the black speech.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, it's a really
I
nice
love stuff like that.
touch. Right. Yeah, because there's also they talk about how like because of their like nature of a beast man, they are they kind of fumble over the language and they
Mm.
can just make a lot of guttural sounds and groans and all that sort of stuff. Not so you kind of get a it's always this sort of regional version of the dark tongue that beastmen are talking. And there's a because they even points out that in order to communicate, beastmen and chaos warriors would be using lots of hand signals and lots of like this kind of stuff, which I quite like. Is it kind of gives it a sort of sense of reality in a way.
Yeah, there's not many debating societies within the Beast Man. Right? It's not. It's just. It's not the way they like to settle things. I don't think. But yeah, it is. It is cool, and it was surprising to see because I would have just assumed that they wouldn't have had much language at all, at least in terms of written language, anyway.
Sure.
But to actually see all those symbols and people love that kind of stuff to put on your flags and your banners and things.
Yeah.
But they provide you banners as well.
Yeah, classic
That's a bit
stuff.
more old school, isn't it? I didn't really realise there was too much of that in the sixth edition era. But you can print them off and colour them in yourself as well, which is
Yeah,
quite cool.
permission
Bit of a
granted.
callback to sort of a decade earlier in White Dwarf, that kind of thing. But cool.
Yeah, and you get there's talk about herdstones and stuff. It would be a
Mm,
long time until we sort of see an official miniature for the
mm.
herdstones, but they're very cool. I think that conceptually they're great, and there's some really nice conversions, some terrain in some of the dioramas and battlefield
Did we ever
imagery.
have one before Age of Sigmar? Because the one that's available
I don't think so.
last was the Age. So I think people were still making them. There were rules for them. I think people were making them themselves in seventh and eighth edition. But we have the one which again people probably know whether it's been re-released or not
Sure,
based
I mean
by the
it's a
time
great,
this video comes
it's a
out.
fantastic model the
Mm.
Age of Sigmar one. So I hope it is
I
re-released.
hope it. Yeah, hopefully it has been re-released. I don't know if there's anything on there that's Age of Sigmar as like a helmet from a stormcast around the
I don't
bottom or
think
anything
so.
like that. But
No, I don't
even
think
then,
so.
they've shown that they can go back and readjust existing stuff for old world. So hopefully, well,
Yeah.
again, we're talking about something that people know by now, probably.
There is another surprise treat in the book towards the back, and that is a John Blanche piece. I think it might be one of the only John Blanche pieces in the book, but it's Rurkar Festigor, the plague
Hmm.
beast of Nurgle,
Right.
and he is very very cool, very very cool. Just like a Nurgle beastman shaman, and it's just a really
Oh
great piece of
yes,
art.
yes, yeah. It's brilliant. There's so much going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
So much movement. But yes,
Yeah.
very cool.
Because there is that we do see references earlier on. It's in the rules. You can take marks of chaos, so you actually can have Zangors or Corngors or what have you. If
And there
you
were
want,
miniatures as well. So
yeah, there were miniatures. I think though that in this generation,
mm,
those miniatures just are they're quite close together. I don't think there's that much difference between them, is there?
no, no, not at all.
No, I think
Minor
we'll see
changes.
later on you'll see a sort of lot of variation. And actually, that is something else that Age of Sigmar did that I think is really fun with the Zangors, where
Mm,
they really not that I think all Zinch has to be beaks and sort of birds, but I do think it's a fun. The Zangor look is a fun one that
yeah.
they created for Silver Tower, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Very cool miniatures.
Yeah.
And would have felt very strange in the feel of this book,
Yeah,
in
yes,
some
I think
ways.
so. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you could get away with a lot of the older, weirder Beastmen from
Agreed. Yeah.
the sort of old Hammer eras. I think that they would still fit very well. And I think as I sort of alluded to before, I really like the fact that they explicitly say in the text, in the lore, yes, most Beastmen now are goat-headed, goat-legged creatures. But one might turn up and he's got the head of a horse. One might have a head of a fly, and it says that that is a thing, and it is still a thing, and I quite like that.
Oh yeah. I hope again, but I don't want to talk too much about something that might have been announced. But the Arcane Journals, nearly everyone has had a new unit of some kind that you kit bash from something else, and it would have been very cool. And again, people probably know very cool if there is a unit in the new Arcane Journal when it comes out that is very much built on a different kind of beastman, and then it
Mm.
says kit bash with your Empire troops or something like that, which would be fun.
Yeah, I'd like that. I'd like that. I mean, I also would hope not to get too much into speculation,
Yeah,
but yeah, I would
speculating
hope that
something that's probably happened already. Which is
yeah, like we've seen some classic miniatures brought back. So we saw the Prince Uthar's dwarf Imperial dwarfs, like that kind of thing. Let's get some of those amazing Trishcard and Beastmen back. There's some
yeah,
incredible miniatures there. Great range, really characterful. Would absolutely love to see some of those in an army alongside the guys from this era, alongside some of the later Beastmen, some of the Age of Sigmar Beastmen as well. There's loads of amazing Beastman models that you can build a pretty awesome army with.
agreed, agreed. I
Yeah,
think they'll be very popular if the molds still exist and they're able to
yeah,
bring them back. I
for
think.
sure. But what's your thoughts overall then on this the sixth edition Beasts of Chaos book? Is this a winner for you? Where's it sort of rank up against some of the other ones we've read recently?
It's different. I mean, it's absolutely a winner. Yeah, I find it very. I was thinking about this when I started reading through this book and how much I love this really dark feel. I thought, oh, do I like? Is this my favorite era? And I don't realize I don't actually. I just love all the different eras for the different things they bring to you. It's like I've got two children and I love them both the same, but they're very different. And I think that's the same with I've got all the nostalgia around fourth and fifth edition, and I love the colour in that High Elf book. But I'm also really drawn to this, and they couldn't be more different in some ways. They almost feel like different universes in the way they're presented.
Mm.
So I just enjoyed it for what it is, and I think the theme works very well. And as Beastman, I think I probably prefer this style than if there was a fifth edition Beastman book, I probably would prefer this style of this one in terms of artwork and feel and that kind of stuff. But the way the lore is presented and all of that is fantastic as well. So I'm a big fan of it. It's not something I've spent a lot of time looking at before as well, so it felt very new. But it was cool. It was cool. I'm a good fan of the book. I think there's a beautiful balance between the colour pages of the miniatures and then that really grim sort of lore and narrative dark feel of all of the rest of it. I think it's very well presented and very well done. I don't know how it played on the tables from on outside of it, who knows, but from a presentation point of view, if you're into your Beastman, this feels like a really cool thing to own and with lots of scope to build very different kinds of armies as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really nice way of looking at it. The idea that really every edition of Warhammer is its own distinct thing. These are
Mm,
not an evolving, changing thing. Really, they are okay. Well, fifth edition is different to sixth edition. Just, I mean, it canonically is. It literally is. There's things that cannot exist across both editions. But saying that, one of the beauties of the sort of human condition, I suppose, is that we can take and pick and choose whatever things we want, and they all of these contradictory ideas can exist together in one place. So the Warhammer world for us, and certainly I feel this way. It one day it will be the brighter, shiny fourth edition for me, and then the next day I might be really enjoying this kind of darker version of it, or it might be in my head one corner looks like this and one corner looks like that, and all sorts. But yes, so I think that's a very healthy way to approach it. But I agree when it comes to this book specifically. I think it's a real winner. I think it's great fun, very themey, very Warhammer. It is a great exploration of a great Warhammer faction. One of the Warhammer factions, I think, that are amongst the most iconic from within Warhammer. I think they speak to me of a sort of innate Warhammer feel.
Yeah.
Beastmen, because I don't think they're really done as well in, as far as I'm aware, in pretty much any other sort of fantasy IP. I think it's very rare to see a Beastman as cool and interesting and well executed as they are here in this edition, and well, in every edition really. But this book I think is great, and I think it speaks to how good a lot of the sixth edition books are in terms of the feel, the look, the lore. There's a real quality to the sixth edition army books.
Yeah.
That's great. So revisiting them is just really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we have completed, Stu, another GW book club. I'm sure we've got plenty more coming in the future. Who knows what they could be? I'm going to take a little guess, and I'm going to assume at some point we'll be doing a Wood Elves army book and visiting those. But anything else could happen on the GW book club for the rest of this year. We've got some big ideas and some really cool stuff coming up. Until such a time as we can share some of that, Stu, where can people find you online?
Miniature Realms. Miniature Realms. Simple as that. Everywhere. YouTube mostly is the home of my channel, which is a lot of Warhammer chat mostly, but lots of other things as well. But you can catch me in all social media platforms other than TikTok. I'm too old for that.
Fantastic. Well, and there'll be links to all of your stuff down below, so anyone can go and find you there. I'm Jordan Sorcery at pretty much every platform. I do have a TikTok, but I am also too old for that. So do with that whatever you want. Until next time, I think that this has been a really fun chat, Stu. Thank you for joining me as usual, and thank you everybody else for joining us. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.